Kale crouched on the jagged edge of the Varan peaks, his heart pounding like a drum. The night was dark, but faint streaks of lightning lit the sky, reflecting off the jagged cliffs. Below him, the cage glimmered faintly, suspended from chains carved from alien alloys. Inside, a small dragonling huddled, its scales shimmering in colors Kale had never seen before. The villagers had warned him. No human who tried to steal from the dragon guardians had ever returned. But Kale's resolve was stronger than fear. He had to free the dragonling. He glanced at the 5 blades strapped to his back. Each one had been stolen from the vaults of the ancient temple, guarded by traps that could kill in a heartbeat. The villagers said the blades were cursed, meant only for dragons or those pure of heart. Kale did not care. He had no one but himself, and he would not leave this creature trapped. Taking a deep breath, he began his descent. The wind whipped against his face as he clung to the cliffs, one hand gripping a rope, the other holding a blade ready. Every step echoed through the mountains like a warning. Kale's mind raced. If the dragon guardians saw him, he would be done. Their eyes could melt stone, and their wings could summon storms. Yet, he reminded himself that Fyra, as he had silently named the dragonling, depended on him. Reaching the cage, Kale studied the lock. It was not a normal lock. Strange symbols glowed faintly across its surface, pulsing like a heartbeat. He took the first blade, sliding it along the grooves. Sparks flew and the lock hissed as if it were alive. Kale's pulse quickened. He moved carefully, guided by instinct and the faint hum of the dragonling. One by one he slid each blade into the lock, each producing a soft, metallic chime. As the 5th blade clicked into place, the lock exploded in a burst of light, throwing Kale backward. He shielded his eyes, feeling the heat of the magic brushing against his skin. When the light dimmed, the cage swung open and Fyra stepped out cautiously. She was smaller than Kale had imagined, no bigger than a large dog, but her eyes glowed with intelligence far beyond her size. She hissed softly, testing him, and Kale extended his hand. "You're safe now," he whispered. Fyra tilted her head and then, with a sudden burst of movement, leaped onto his shoulder. Her claws were sharp but careful, almost as if she understood his intentions. Kale felt a warmth in his chest he had not felt before. It was hope. He turned to climb back, but the ground beneath him trembled. Rocks shifted and distant thunder echoed through the peaks. Kale froze. He knew that sound. The dragon guardians were aware. They did not miss a single theft of a blade, or a single freed dragonling. They were coming. Kale gritted his teeth. He had planned for this, but only in theory. Now theory met reality. He ran, darting between jagged rocks, leaping across small gaps, Fyra clinging to his shoulder. Every movement was measured, every breath controlled. Kale had learned to survive in the mountains, but this was more than survival. It was a test. The first guardian appeared as a shadow against the storm clouds. Its wings were vast, cutting through the air with a sound like thunder. Its eyes glowed amber, and Kale felt their gaze like fire on his skin. He ducked instinctively, rolling behind a jagged outcrop. Fyra hissed softly but did not panic. Kale realized the dragonling's presence calmed him, as if they shared a single heartbeat. The guardian roared, a sound that shook stones loose and sent Kale stumbling. Lightning flashed, revealing the full scale of the beast. Its scales were black as night with veins of molten gold, and its wings spanned more than the width of the canyon. Kale's mind raced. Fighting it would be suicide. Running was the only chance. He sprinted across a narrow ledge, using the blades not as weapons but as tools. One cut through a loose rope to drop a rock on the guardian below. Another sliced a vine hanging from the cliff to swing across a gap. Sparks flew with every movement, and Kale felt a thrill he had never known. This was not just survival, it was a dance with life itself. As the night deepened, Kale found a narrow crevice in the cliff wall. He squeezed inside, hiding Fyra beneath his cloak. The guardian circled above, its roar echoing through the peaks, searching. Kale held his breath, feeling Fyra's tiny claws pressing against his chest. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. It was impossible to tell in the stormlit night. Finally, the guardian's roar faded, replaced by the distant rumble of the wind. Kale exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. Fyra stirred, nudging his cheek with her tiny snout. Kale smiled despite exhaustion. They had survived the first trial. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The realm of dragons was vast, and he had just stolen a dragonling from the mightiest beings in existence. The real challenge had yet to come. Kale looked out over the jagged peaks, the storm settling, and whispered, "We will be ready." Fyra chirped softly in response, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Together they stepped forward into the unknown, leaving behind the vault, the 5 blades, and the echo of the Dragon Guardian's fury. The night was dark, but for the first time, Kale felt that he and Fyra had a chance, not just to survive but to rise. The stars above shone faintly through the storm clouds. Somewhere beyond the peaks, other eyes watched. Guardians, ancient and powerful, waited to see if Kale would prove himself worthy. For now he and Fyra had escaped the first trap, but the realm of dragons would not forgive easily. And Kale, for the first time, felt the weight of a responsibility far greater than himself. The journey had begun. Kale ran along the narrow cliffs of the shattered sky, the wind whipping his hair and the cold biting at his face. Fyra clung tightly to his shoulder, her tiny claws pressing into his jacket as her wings twitched nervously. The Dragon Guardians had not given up. Their shadows stretched across the jagged rocks below, massive wings cutting through the clouds like knives. Every heartbeat felt like a drum of warning. Kale knew they could strike at any moment and he had to keep moving. The shattered sky was a place no human dared enter. Gaps opened into endless voids, wind currents twisted like serpents, and lightning struck without warning. Kale had crossed these cliffs before as a scavenger, but never with a dragonling on his shoulder and certain death chasing him. He felt Fyra's warmth as she hummed softly. The sound was strange, almost musical, and Kale realized it calmed him, made him sharper, faster. The bond between them was growing, and he was beginning to trust her instincts as much as his own. Ahead, the first guardian descended, its claws scraping the stone as it landed on a floating shard of rock. Its eyes were amber, glowing with fury, and it let out a roar that shook the air. Kale ducked behind a jagged boulder, feeling the vibration of the roar through his chest. Fyra hissed softly and unfurled her wings, creating a small gust that stirred dust and debris, making it harder for the guardian to see them clearly. Kale gritted his teeth. He needed a plan. Using the 5 blades he began to manipulate the environment. One blade sliced a vine hanging from a cliff, dropping rocks in the guardian's path. Another was used to wedge a loose stone, causing it to tumble just as the guardian lunged. Sparks flew as the blades met stone and metal, and Kale felt a thrill he had never experienced. Every move was risky but he had no choice. If he stopped, even for a second, the guardian would tear him apart. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the next guardian as it swooped down from above. This one was larger, with scales that glimmered like liquid silver and wings that spread wide enough to darken the entire canyon. Kale sprinted, leaping across a narrow gap that would have killed anyone else. Fyra flapped her wings to balance, nudging him when a loose rock threatened to knock him off. Kale realized she was not just a passenger, she was helping him survive. The chase twisted and turned through the shattered sky, each moment more dangerous than the last. Kale used the blades to cut vines, swing across gaps, and create makeshift bridges. Fyra emitted a soft hum every time he moved, almost guiding him. Kale felt a strange sense of connection to the Dragonling, as if their minds were linked in some invisible way. He began to anticipate her movements and she seemed to anticipate his. Together they were faster, sharper, more alive than they had ever been alone. The guardians were relentless. One guardian dove from above, its massive claws aimed directly at Kale. He rolled to the side, using a blade to cut a hanging shard of rock. It fell, striking the guardian and sending it off course. Sparks flew, and Kale could see the creature's eyes widen in surprise. He did not celebrate. There was no time. Another guardian was already circling, its wings stirring a mini tornado of debris. Kale's lungs burned, his muscles screamed for rest, but he pressed on. He had learned to read the air currents to sense where the next attack might come. Fyra chirped softly, almost in encouragement. Kale realized that her hum was more than a bond, it was a shield. Whenever she emitted the sound, the guardians hesitated, uncertain of her presence. Kale had never seen anything like it, but he had no time to question. He had to survive. As they reached a narrow ridge, Kale spotted a floating temple far ahead, its spires glowing faintly in the stormlit night. He remembered stories of the ancient sanctum, a place untouched by time, a refuge for those brave enough to reach it. It was their only hope. Kale adjusted Fyra on his shoulder and leapt across a gap that would have killed him in any other moment. Fyra flapped her wings hard, carrying some of his weight, and they landed together on the temple's outer wall. The guardians circled above, roaring in frustration. Kale pressed his back against the cold stone, feeling Fyra's small body trembling against him. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. The storm raged on, rain slicing through the night, lightning flashing across the sky. Kale looked at Fyra and whispered, "We're not done yet, but we made it this far." Fyra chirped softly, her glowing eyes meeting his, full of trust and curiosity. Inside the temple the air was still and cold. Ancient markings lined the walls, glowing faintly in colors Kale had never seen before. He felt a strange calm settle over him, the kind he had not felt since before the chase began. Fyra stretched her wings, stepping lightly across the stone floor. Kale ran his hand over her scales, marveling at their texture, so smooth yet strong. He knew the guardians would not stop. They would wait, watching, testing him. But for now they had survived. Kale had stolen the Dragonling and evaded the mightiest creatures of the peaks, and he had done it together with Fyra. The bond between them had grown stronger with each heartbeat, each danger faced, each near-death moment. Kale pressed himself against the temple wall, looking out at the storm-lashed shattered sky. Somewhere the guardians circled, waiting. Somewhere, other dangers lurked. But Kale felt something he had not felt before: hope. With Fyra at his side he could face whatever came next. Together they would survive, and perhaps one day they would rise to something greater than either had imagined. The night stretched on, storm and wind carrying the echoes of the guardians' roars. Kale held Fyra close, feeling her hum in response to his heartbeat. This was only the beginning of their journey. The shattered sky had tested them, but they had endured. And Kale knew deep down that the trials ahead would be even greater. With a final glance at the dark peaks and the glowing spires of the temple ahead, Kale whispered to Fyra, "We keep moving. We survive. Together." And with that they stepped forward into the unknown, ready for whatever the dragons or the realm had in store. Kale and Fyra stepped carefully into the hidden sanctum, the storm outside fading behind them. The temple floated on magnetic currents high above the jagged peaks, its stone walls glowing faintly with runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air was cold but still, carrying the faint scent of ozone and something older, something powerful. Kale had never felt a place like this. It was alive but calm. He glanced at Fyra, who stepped lightly on the stone floor, her wings folding neatly against her small body. "This is it," Kale whispered, his voice barely audible. Fyra chirped softly in response, her glowing eyes scanning the room. Ancient markings covered the walls, depicting dragons of all sizes, some flying, some perched, some standing beside humans. Kale could feel the weight of history pressing against him, the lives of countless dragons who had lived and fought here long before humans walked the world. He shivered, both in awe and fear. Kale moved further inside, studying the inscriptions. They told stories of the 5 blades he carried, each forged with magic strong enough to pierce the scales of dragons. The runes showed humans wielding the blades, not to kill but to communicate, to bond, to awaken the powers hidden inside dragons. Kale ran his fingers over the carvings, feeling a strange warmth beneath his touch. He realized the blades were not just weapons, they were keys. Keys to understanding, to connection, to something far greater than he had imagined. Fyra nudged him, chirping again. Kale turned and saw a small pool of crystal-clear water. As he leaned over, he saw the reflection of her scales in the liquid. They shimmered like liquid fire, glowing softly in the dim light. He noticed that her hum had grown stronger, vibrating through the stone floor and his own body. Kale realized that Fyra was not just a dragonling. She carried a power that was waking inside her, a force that even the guardians feared. Kale spent hours exploring the sanctum, learning from the markings, testing the blades, and listening to Fyra's hum. Slowly he began to understand her language, not words but feelings. Excitement, fear, trust, curiosity, all flowed between them in silent waves. Kale felt more alive than he ever had, more connected, as if a part of him had always been meant to find this place. The blades, the temple, the dragonling, it was all part of something bigger, something he could not yet name. Then a sudden tremor shook the sanctum. Kale stumbled but caught himself, his eyes widening. Fyra hissed softly, her wings flaring. From the shadows of the far wall, a figure emerged. It was massive, far larger than any dragonling, with scales that glimmered like polished stone. Its eyes glowed amber, and Kale felt the weight of its gaze pressing down on him. The hidden guardians of the sanctum had sensed his presence. Kale froze, gripping the blades tightly. This was no ordinary dragon. It was one of the mightiest guardians, a being older than the mountains themselves. Its wings stretched wide, and yet it moved with a silent grace. Fyra stepped forward, her tiny form unafraid, humming loudly. The guardian tilted its head, listening as if recognizing something in the dragonling's call. Kale's heart pounded. He had expected a fight, maybe death, but not this silent judgment. The guardian moved closer, circling them slowly. Kale noticed the runes on the walls glowing brighter, reacting to the presence of the ancient dragon. He realized the temple itself was alive, testing him, measuring his courage and heart. He whispered to Fyra, "We have to show them we mean no harm." She chirped, flapping her wings in agreement. Kale stepped forward cautiously, holding the 5 blades before him, not as weapons but as symbols of trust. The guardian lowered its head, letting out a low, rumbling sound. Kale felt it in his chest, vibrating through him, testing him, asking questions he could not answer in words. Fyra hissed softly, leaning against him, and Kale realized the bond between them was the key. The guardian's eyes softened slightly, recognizing that Kale did not steal out of greed or selfishness, but out of care for the Dragonling. Hours passed like this. The guardian watched, circling and testing, while Kale and Fyra waited patiently, showing respect and courage in every movement. The air was thick with magic, humming with the history of dragons and humans who had once walked together. Kale realized that this was not just a sanctuary, it was a school, a place to learn the ways of dragons, the ways of trust, of strength, of survival. Finally the guardian spoke, not in words but through thought, echoing in Kale's mind. "You are not like the others. You value life. You are brave. You may stay but you must learn." Kale's heart leapt. He had passed the first test. Fyra chirped in delight, her wings flicking happily. Kale nodded, understanding that this was just the beginning. He had to grow, train, and awaken the power inside Fyra, or they would never survive the trials ahead. Kale spent the next days exploring the sanctum, learning from the inscriptions and practicing with the blades. Fyra began to demonstrate powers he had never seen. Small flames, gusts of wind, even brief flashes of light from her scales. Kale learned to anticipate her movements, to work in unison with her, creating a bond stronger than anything he had known. Every success was met with approval from the guardian, every mistake a lesson. The hidden sanctum became a world of its own. Kale and Fyra moved through corridors that seemed endless, finding new rooms, new runes, and more secrets of the dragon guardians. Kale began to understand that the guardians had chosen this place for a reason. It was a test, a training ground, and a home for those willing to rise. The connection between human and dragon, once rare and fragile, was being reborn here. One night, as Kale rested against a glowing wall and Fyra curled on his lap, he realized the truth. The guardians were not just enemies to fear, they were teachers, measuring his courage, his heart, his willingness to protect and bond with dragons. If he succeeded, he would not just survive. He could rise to something greater than himself, something no human had ever done. Outside, the storms of the shattered sky raged, but inside the sanctum, Kale and Fyra felt safe, ready to face the trials ahead. Kale looked at the glowing runes, at Fyra's small, shining eyes, and whispered, "We will learn. We will survive. And we will rise." Fyra chirped, flapping her wings, and Kale knew their journey was only beginning. The hidden sanctum held secrets, power, and danger, but it was theirs now. Kale understood that what he learned here would shape everything. His life, Fyra's life, and the future of humans and dragons alike. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, the mightiest guardians watched, waiting for the moment Kale and Fyra would face the next great challenge. Kale woke to the sound of wings beating above the hidden sanctum. The air was thick with power, vibrating through the stone floors, and Fyra stirred on his lap, her glowing eyes wide with excitement and fear. Today was different. He could feel it in the air, an energy that pressed on his chest and made his heart race. The guardians had come. The trial had begun. He stepped out onto the open courtyard of the sanctum, the storm outside now a distant roar. 5 massive dragons hovered before him, each radiating power and ancient authority. One scale shimmered like molten lava, another glimmered like ice, a third rippled with storm clouds, the fourth was earthen and solid, and the fifth shone with a light so bright it almost hurt to look at. Kale felt a mixture of awe and fear. These were the guardians of legend, the keepers of dragon wisdom, and they were here to test him. Fyra chirped softly and nudged his shoulder. Kale took a deep breath, adjusting the 5 blades he carried. He knew the trial was not about strength alone. It was about courage, cleverness, and the bond between him and Fyra. The guardians circled, their wings stirring the wind, creating gusts that threatened to knock Kale off his feet. Sparks flew from the runes etched into the courtyard floor as the dragons tested him, sending bursts of flame, wind, ice, and stone. The first challenge came from the molten dragon. Lava shot from its mouth, carving lines across the stone. Kale ran, slicing a blade into the floor, creating a small shield that redirected the molten stream. Fyra flapped her wings, sending a gust of wind to cool the surface just enough for him to move across. He realized that their teamwork was the key. Every movement had to be in sync, every choice precise. The ice dragon struck next, sending shards of frozen crystal toward him. Kale rolled to the side, feeling one shard graze his shoulder. Fyra emitted a high-pitched hum, vibrating through the stone and melting part of the ice before it hit. Kale adjusted his grip on the blades, weaving them like extensions of his body, each one cutting, blocking, and redirecting danger. Sweat ran down his face, but he did not falter. Failure was not an option. The storm dragon unleashed a torrent of wind and lightning, tossing Kale into the air. He used the blades to hook onto floating fragments of rock, swinging across the courtyard. Fyra flapped her wings strongly, holding steady against the gusts, guiding him through the chaos. Kale realized that each dragon was testing a different part of him. Courage, speed, intelligence, and his connection with Fyra. The trial was not meant to kill him but to shape him. The earth dragon stomped, sending tremors through the courtyard, cracks opening beneath Kale's feet. He leapt, landing on a floating stone just as the ground collapsed behind him. Fyra chirped, and Kale caught the tiny dragonling's gaze, feeling the bond between them grow stronger. Every near fall, every close call built trust. He could sense Fyra's thoughts, her feelings, and she could sense his. Together they were more than human and dragon, they were a single force. Finally the light dragon hovered above, its glow intense and pure. It did not attack with fire or wind, but with focus, testing Kale's inner strength. Kale held his 5 blades before him, feeling their hum as they resonated with the dragon's energy. He closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself, feeling Fyra's warmth against him. The hum from Fyra grew louder, steady, as if confirming their bond. Kale opened his eyes and felt a surge of clarity. He understood. The trial was not just about skill, it was about trust, courage, and unity. He moved as one with Fyra, their actions fluid and instinctive. The molten, ice, storm, and earth dragons tested him again, but now he anticipated their moves. With the 5 blades and Fyra's emerging powers, he redirected attacks, blocked dangers, and used the environment to his advantage. Sparks and flashes of elemental power lit the courtyard as Kale dodged, leapt, and struck. He could feel the guardians watching, judging, measuring every decision. At one point, a massive wave of flame and wind combined, threatening to engulf them both. Kale grabbed Fyra, feeling her hum pulse stronger than ever, and they leapt together. Fyra spread her wings wide, creating a shield of energy that deflected the assault. The guardians paused, watching in silence. Kale realized he had passed the test, not by fighting alone but by working with Fyra, trusting her, and thinking beyond himself. The courtyard fell silent. The 5 dragons hovered in a circle around Kale and Fyra, their wings slowing. Kale dropped to one knee, exhausted but alive. Fyra nestled against him, glowing softly, her hum fading into a calm vibration. Then in unison the guardians lowered their heads, a silent acknowledgement of respect. Kale had earned it. A warm, low rumble echoed through the courtyard. One of the guardians spoke, not with words but through thought. You are brave. You honor the bond between human and dragon. You may rise to join us, but your journey has only begun. Kale felt a rush of pride and relief, but he knew they were right. The hardest challenges were still ahead. He looked at Fyra, her eyes shining, wings folding neatly. She chirped softly as if saying she was proud too. Kale knew that their bond had saved them, that courage alone was never enough. Together they were strong. Together they could face anything. Kale stood slowly, feeling the blades hum in his hands, feeling Fyra's small body alive against him. He raised his head to the sky, where the guardians hovered like stars against the dark clouds. We will rise, he whispered. Together. Fyra chirped, echoing his words, and Kale felt the warmth of hope fill him, stronger than any fear he had faced. The trial of flame and sky was over, but Kale knew the guardians were only preparing him for what was next. They had tested his courage, his cleverness, and his bond with Fyra. The real challenge would be learning to use their power together, to survive in a world where dragons and humans faced dangers beyond imagination. Kale looked out across the floating courtyard, the stormlit sky stretching into infinity. Somewhere beyond the clouds, other trials awaited. But he and Fyra were ready. They had faced fire, ice, wind, earth, and light and survived. They had earned the Guardian's respect. And Kale understood, deep in his heart, that he and Fyra were no longer just a human and a dragonling. They were a team, a force capable of rising among the mightiest beings in the realm. With one last glance at the hovering guardians, Kale whispered to Fyra, "We are ready for anything." She chirped, spreading her tiny wings, and together they stepped forward, knowing the journey ahead would test them even more, but this time they would face it as one. Kale stepped onto the highest platform of the hidden sanctum, the wind from the shattered sky whipping around him. Fyra perched on his shoulder, her tiny claws gripping his jacket as her wings twitched nervously. The 5 guardians hovered before them, immense and powerful, their eyes glowing like ancient fires. But today there was no threat in their gaze, only judgment, recognition, and expectation. Kale took a deep breath. This was the final moment. The guardians moved closer, forming a circle around him. Kale held the 5 blades before him, feeling the hum of their magic resonate with Fyra's own emerging power. He could feel her warmth, her heartbeat, her confidence. She had grown stronger since the trial, her wings shining with energy, her small form radiating courage. Kale realized that their bond had become more than friendship. It was trust, understanding, a force that could stand against even the mightiest dragons. One guardian stepped forward, its scales shimmering like molten lava. Kale felt the heat in the air as the dragon's eyes studied him closely. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, the guardian lowered its massive head and nudged Kale gently with its snout. It was a sign of acceptance, a signal that he had passed the final test. Kale's chest swelled with pride, but he knew this was only the beginning. The other guardians followed, each bowing subtly, their massive wings folding gracefully. The ice dragon lowered its head, the storm dragon hummed with energy, the earth dragon pressed close to the ground, and the light dragon glowed even brighter than before. Kale felt a warmth spreading through him. For the first time he understood what it meant to be among the dragon guardians, not as a human intruder but as a worthy ally. Fyra chirped happily, her glow lighting up the platform. Kale laughed softly, feeling a relief he had never known. They had done it. Together they had survived every challenge, every test, every danger. The guardians had recognized not just his courage but his heart. Kale knew that this bond was rare. Few humans had ever earned the trust of dragons, and fewer still had done it with such unity. One of the guardians, the light dragon, spoke through thought, its voice calm and powerful in Kale's mind. "You have proven your worth, Kale. Your courage, your cleverness, and your bond with the Dragonling show that you are capable of rising among us. The realm of dragons and humans is changing, and you are part of that change." Kale felt the weight of those words. He was no longer just a scavenger, no longer just a human trying to survive. He had a place here, among beings older and stronger than he could have imagined. Kale looked at Fyra, her glowing eyes meeting his. He saw trust, pride, and joy reflected in her gaze. He realized that they had grown together, that their journey had made them both stronger. Fyra chirped again, flapping her wings, sending a small gust of wind that stirred the runes on the platform. The blades in Kale's hands vibrated in response, as if acknowledging the moment. The molten guardian leaned down, nudging Kale gently again. He reached out and touched its massive snout, feeling the rough texture of its scales. The ice dragon pressed close, exhaling cold air that brushed his face. The storm dragon flapped its wings, stirring a breeze that carried electricity across the platform. The earth dragon shifted, sending small tremors beneath Kale's feet, and the light dragon's glow bathed them all in warmth. It was a silent celebration, a recognition of what Kale and Fyra had accomplished. Kale lowered the blades slowly, understanding that he no longer needed them as weapons. They were symbols now, proof of his courage and bond. Fyra chirped softly, nuzzling his cheek, and Kale felt a surge of emotion. He had started this journey as a thief, as a human risking death to save a dragonling. Now he stood among the mightiest dragon guardians, no longer an intruder, no longer alone. The guardians began to lift into the sky, their massive forms glowing against the horizon. Kale felt a mix of awe and anticipation. He knew they were offering him more than recognition. They were offering guidance, a chance to learn, to grow, to protect and rise alongside dragons. Fyra chirped again, flapping her wings as if urging him to follow. Kale smiled and stepped to the edge of the platform, feeling the wind lift him slightly, buoyed by the magic of the sanctum. He looked out across the shattered sky, the jagged cliffs and floating rocks stretching endlessly. Somewhere beyond, other dragons waited, other challenges loomed, but Kale felt ready. He was no longer just a human scavenger. He was a guardian in training, a partner to Fyra, a bridge between humans and dragons. The realm of dragons and humans was vast and dangerous, but for the first time, Kale felt confident that he and Fyra could rise together. Kale turned to Fyra and whispered, "We've come this far, but this is only the start. Together we can face anything. She chirped, her glow brightening, and Kale felt a warmth spread through him. The blades hummed softly in his hands, a reminder of the path they had taken and the power that now flowed through them both. As the Guardians disappeared into the horizon, Kale and Fyra stood side by side on the platform. The wind howled around them, carrying the echoes of their trials and victories. Kale felt a sense of calm and purpose he had never known. The journey had been dangerous, frightening, and exhausting, but it had led him here, to a place where humans and dragons could stand together, where courage and heart mattered more than strength alone. Kale looked at the distant peaks and floating temples, at the vast expanse of the shattered sky, and felt hope fill his chest. With Fyra by his side, he knew that the realm's greatest challenges could be faced, that dragons and humans could rise together, and that he had earned his place among the Guardians. He bent down slightly, letting Fyra perch comfortably on his shoulder. She chirped happily and Kale laughed softly. "We made it, little one," he said. "No matter what comes next, we'll face it together." The stars above twinkled faintly through the storm clouds, casting silver light over the platform. Kale raised his head, feeling the weight of responsibility and the thrill of possibility. The hidden sanctum was no longer just a refuge, it was a beginning, a place where a human and a dragonling had proven themselves worthy of the mightiest guardians. Kale took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to embrace the future. He and Fyra were no longer merely survivors, they were a team, a force of courage and a bridge between worlds. And as the wind carried their determination across the shattered sky, Kale knew one thing for certain. The journey ahead would be dangerous, yes, but together they could rise among the mightiest dragons, stronger than anyone had ever imagined. The realm had accepted them, the Guardians had honored them, and Kale felt alive like never before. For the first time he knew what it meant to belong, not just as a human, not just as a thief, but as a part of something greater. With Fyra glowing brightly at his side, he whispered, "We belong here. And we will rise." The journey of Kale and Fyra was just beginning, but now, among the Dragon Guardians, they were ready for anything.